The palace was a place of gold and grandeur, but it felt like a guarded cage to Caesar. He stood at the edge of the royal gardens, the moonlight casting long shadows over the well-trimmed lawns. The weight of his crown pressed heavily on his brow, not because of its jewels, but because of the expectations it carried. He was a prince, but he was also a prisoner, trapped by the endless demands of royalty and the shallow affections of those who sought his favor for their gain. Caesar sighed. His fingers brushed against the intricate patterns of his royal robe. He had everything the man would want: wealth, power, and prestige. Yet he felt empty. He longed for something money couldn't buy. Something real, true love. Not the kind that came with a title, but the kind that saw beyond the crown and into the heart. With a deep breath, Caesar made his decision. He removed his robe, folding it neatly and placing it on the marble bench. In his place, he donned the simple attire of woodcarver, a leather apron, a plain tunic, and sturdy boots. He left his crown behind, feeling the cool night air on his bare head for the first time in years. As he stepped beyond the palace gates, Caesar felt a strange sense of freedom. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, he felt alive. He whispered to himself, "True love cannot be bought. It must be earned." And with that, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind the only life he had ever known. The village of Edinkra was a world away from the palace, nestled between golden savannas and dense forest. It was a place of simplicity and warmth. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter, the rhythmic tapping of woodcarvers, and the distant hum of village life. Caesar took it all in, his heart swelling with a sense of belonging he had never felt before. He rented a small hut on the outskirts of the village, its walls made of mud and its roof thatched with dried grass. It was a far cry from the marble halls of the palace, but to Caesar, it felt like home. He set up his woodworking tools, a chisel, a mallet, and blocks of mahogany, and began his new life as a wood carver. The villagers, unaware of his royal lineage, welcomed him warmly. They admired his skill, marveling at the intricate and household items he created. Caesar spent his days carving each stroke of his chisel, a reflection of his thoughts and emotions. Though his hands grew calloused and his back ached from hours of work, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. As the days turned into weeks, Caesar began to find joy in the simple things: the laughter of children playing, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the markets, and the quiet moments of solitude as he worked on his carvings. He was no longer a prince, but he felt more like himself than he ever had before. In the heart of the village stood Mabina's food stall, a bustling hub of activity. Mabina was a stern woman with a sharp tongue and a no-nonsense attitude. She ran the store with an iron fist, her voice often rising above the din of the market as she backed orders at her daughter Amma and her niece Naa. Naa, orphaned at a young age, had lived with Mabina since she was a child. Though Mabina had taken her in, she treated Naa more like a servant than family. Naa worked tirelessly, her hands calloused from the hours of grinding spices and her back aching from carrying heavy pots. Yet, despite the harsh treatment, she never complained. Her kindness shone through her weary eyes, and her smile was a beacon of light in the food store. Amma, on the other hand, was the apple of Mabina's eyes. Spoiled and entitled, she often shirked her responsibilities, leaving Naa to pick up the slack. The contrast between the two cousins was stark, and it didn't go unnoticed by the villagers. Caesar often passed by the store on his way to the market, his eyes drawn to Naa's quiet strength. There was something about her, a resilience, a grace that captivated him. He made a mental note to visit the store one day, little knowing how that decision would change his life forever. Caesar's first visit to Mabina's food stall was uneventful. He ordered plain kenkey and sat quietly at a corner table, observing the lively atmosphere. The store was a hive of activity, with villagers coming and going, their voices blending into a music of laughter and chatter. Naa approached him with a warm smile, her hands balancing a tray of food. "You are the new woodcarver, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft but confident. Caesar looked up, surprised by her directness. "Yes," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm Caesar." "I'm Naa," she said, placing the plate of kenkey in front of him. "Welcome to Edinkra." Their conversation was brief, but it left an impression on both. Caesar was struck by Naa's gentle demeanor, while Naa was intrigued by the quiet intensity in Caesar's eyes. As she walked away, Caesar found himself watching her, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. Caesar became a regular at Mabina's food store, always ordering plain kenkey without fish. Naa noticed his frugality and wondered why he never indulged. One day, as she cleared his plate, she couldn't resist asking, "Don't you like fish?" Caesar hesitated, his eyes dropping to his plate. I don't have enough for fish," he admitted quietly. Naa's heart ached for him. She knew what it was like to go without, to stretch every coin until it nearly snapped. She nodded, her mind already racing with ways to help. That night, as she lay on her mat, she couldn't stop thinking about Caesar. His quiet strength, his humility, it stirred something in her. She resolved to do something, even if it was small. The next day, when Caesar came to the store, Naa added a piece of fish to his plate, her heart pounding as she did so. She placed the plate in front of him, leaning down to whisper, "Don't tell anyone." Caesar stared at the fish, his throat tight with emotion. No one had ever shown him such kindness. He picked up the fish, his hands trembling slightly, and took a bite. It was the most delicious meal he had ever tasted. From that day on, Naa continued to add fish to Caesar's plate, always whispering, "Don't tell anyone."